Welcome back to today's episode, the podcast where we discuss the most recent installment of a different series every show. It is Monday, December 8th, the end of the year, and it's also a very important day in history. It seems to be the end of a lot of things. In 2024, December 8th is when the Eras Tour ended.
Oh, the final one.
In 2022, Trevor Noah ended his tenure on The Daily Show, December 8th. It was the last time that Ringo hosted SNL back in the 80s. Also,
I
the
didn't even know
only
he-
time that he
Yeah,
hosted.
I was going to say, I didn't even know he hosted.
And it was the end of Roger Maris's career on the Yankees, December 8th. That's when he was traded and was now considered a terrible trade. And then it was also the end of John Kelly being the chief of staff of Trump. And so with ends come new beginnings, and no series, or actually few series, know this more than Spartacus. Picking up over a decade after the last episode ran.
2013.
Spartacus has not returned. However, another main character from that series has, Ashur. Now it's Spartacus House of Ashur. 2 episodes are out. It's back on Starz. We should talk about the original first.
Yes, and as a disclaimer, Spartacus House of Usher, that's what I kept on typing into Google, and then Gemini would come back and be like, you're combining 2 different TV shows, so I need to remember it's House of Ashur. But my first question, who would win in a fight, Spartacus or Gannicus?
I think they did fight. In the 3rd season when Gannicus comes back, or maybe it was the beginning of the 4th season. I think it was the 3rd season, though, is when Gannicus returns and then they have a little bit of a beef in the arena. Gannicus is sent in to kill Spartacus, if I remember correctly. And then throughout several times, they kind of compete. I personally am more in favor of Gannicus. I think he was better at fighting, but it's up to whoever wants to pick.
Well, like you were talking about, kind of the at the start, the premiere episode set a record for Starz at the time.
Right, so this was Starz' flagship series. We should talk about the environment in 2009. I think the Pacific was like the biggest expensive show that was coming out. You had Breaking Bad.
This is before Game of Thrones.
It was a change in atmosphere in TV. There was prestigious television shows coming out to the small screen. However, Spartacus could be included in those in a way because they spent $30 million on this show to get it pipelined, and it was just completely different than what anybody had seen before. Everybody compared it to 300, of course.
Yeah.
But it was like, it took a while for it to find its footing, and it promised sex and violence, the kind that had never been seen before.
Yes.
On the small screen.
Could you compare it to something like Gladiator? I only saw that about 2 months ago.
But just like 300 could be compared to Gladiator. They had Gladiator camps. Part of that $30 million was spent on bringing everybody who was cast into these camps. They've talked about that at length in like previous seasons.
And what side of the aisle are you on? Because there is a stark divide when it comes to critics and when it comes to the audience. Because critics, the first season got 52%, then 79%, 69%. But you look at the audience score, 88%, 93%, 86%. It's like kind of like the Terminalist, BMS, the Boondocks, whenever you see these like high scores, because it even has an 8.4 on IMDb. I think at one point at 8.7, it was on the top 250. What did you think of it?
I think it's a little bit more subtle than that. In fact, I don't think it's one of those ones where it's just all the audience was on board with how crappy some of the CGI could look, and that the critics hated it. I think that it really did. People made their judgments really soon after it came out, and the first few episodes, everybody kind of admits weren't that good. But by the end of season 1, it pulled kind of a fast one, and suddenly it seemed like Andy Whitfield as Spartacus, that he and the rest of like the dialogue somehow like managed to conspire to make a really good ending script. And so like by the end of the season 1, people were really curious as to see where the story would go. And unfortunately, of course, this is the weird thing. A TV show loses its main character.
Yeah.
And usually House of Cards, That 70s Show, The Office, The Walking Dead,
they address it.
The characters aren't the ones in the title, but Spartacus, they lost Spartacus. And then the show got, in my opinion, better. And most people say that the prequel that came out afterwards, which acted as a season 2 where they introduced Gannicus.
I think it was 6 episodes.
Yes, that was where I was introduced to the show. So I was back watching Netflix in the day, and there was these, like, they used to do it by stars. Like, stars were the value meter into what they guessed that you would like.
Like 4.3, 4.4.
I don't know if it even had the night. It was just like how far the star was filled.
Right.
And so like this one had like 5 full red stars. And I just stared at it for a while, like weeks on end, just being like, I really don't want to click on this. It doesn't look like anything other than, this dumb fighting show. And so I ended up watching it though eventually. And I was just like blown away by how good it was on its own. And I didn't even know it was a prequel at that point. So, like, this was really before prequels became even a thing. You
Yes.
think about Andor, Better Call Saul, Alien Earth, Endeavor. It was before all of them. And so the first two seasons, the way that they just randomly were assembled like they were, worked. And then after that, when they recast for Spartacus, because unfortunately Andy Whitfield died, I think the last two seasons, they had a story to tell. They wanted to be loosely historically accurate. So they had Crixus and Gannicus and Spartacus and everybody fighting the Romans. And Caesar. Caesar was popping in there too.
And Stephen D. Knight even said that the same people that were kind of consultants in terms of accuracy for that are like PhD professors, and they came back to also help with accuracy with this TV show.
Yeah, and it's apparent this TV show feels a lot like the last TV show. But what I was getting at is they had this mindset of we want to tell the story, the end of Spartacus. If you watch the House of Ashur, the first two episodes, they kept canon at least his death. Like Spartacus has died.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
They show us the replay of him being stabbed 1,000 times or whatever through the back, but he does take out a hell of a lot of people, and it's a triumphant death. And there were survivors at the end of it, so they could have made this show into a spinoff, like a straight out spinoff. That's not exactly the route that they decided to do. But I do want to point out also the flaws. So that's one of the things that Starz did was it held its, and I'm not talking about the fact that Andy Whitfield was replaced. I'm talking about more the ones that existed from season one, which was that it is gratuitous. It's a softcore porn at points. It makes Game of Thrones, when it was getting bashed for showing like boobs and dicks and stuff like that, it makes it look like VeggieTales. Like this is so over the top that I have read so many people who were just disgusted by it and had to turn it off, and I don't blame them. There are scenes, especially in the first few episodes, where you really don't see a story developing, that you're just like, why am I watching this? I was fortunate enough, again, by the Gannicus season, it felt like there was a story developing amidst everything, even from episode one. I think those six episodes were great.
I remember, back in the early 2010s, you were talking about how violent this show was. I only ever saw the finale. I didn't watch any of the other series, but the two parts I remember most, and they were very violent, was Spartacus's death, but also when the enemy was coming towards them, and Spartacus was telling everyone on his side to kind of hold their attack, and then underneath all this dirt, there was just a ton of sticks, and like that first round of the enemy just fall and get shish kebabbed, and I was like, this is the most violent show I've ever seen. It was like when I saw the
That just
Django.
sounds like 300.
Well, it honestly reminded me a lot when I saw like the Django Unchained for the first time, which was the first Quentin Tarantino movie, and up until that point, it was the most violent movie
I know, but the thing where you're talking about the shields and everybody waiting for that's 300.
Well, it happened in the finale of Spartacus too.
Okay,
You
all
remember
right.
that?
No, I remember on Mount Vesuvius, a bunch of stuff going down. But yeah, so House of Ashur is kind of existing in a weird realm. Ashur, if out of the main characters, he was one of the villains.
Yes.
And he was probably most people's least favorite because he was just this sniveling, conniving piece of shit who was a gladiator, but the weakest of them, and also just like was completely betraying them all the time, right?
Right.
And so he gets his due in the ending of On Mount Vesuvius when they decapitate him. And so in the first 5 minutes of this show, you're seeing him in hell. And
he's actually there.
Yeah, he's in hell, which is weird because, like, as much as Spartacus does embellish, it doesn't really fall into witchcraft and wizardry.
Going underneath the underworld, yeah.
It doesn't ever do anything, even as crazy as Game of Thrones with, like, the Red Witch or anything. It fell into fate. It talked about fate a lot, but it wasn't so much about the supernatural.
Right.
But here we kick off and he's in hell, and he's visited by Lucretia, who is Batiatus's wife, played by Lucy Lawless, and she tells him, like, this is going to be another form of torture for you. We're going to send you back and give you everything you ever wanted, as if you had survived that day and that you were the one who was one of the ones responsible for killing Spartacus. And if that's what hell is, where like after a while they just give you everything that you wanted and bring you back to being alive.
You suffered enough.
That's not what she was saying. He raped her in the first series, I think, and like he was bad to her. So the idea of this reward being somehow a punishment kind of it's weird to me, and also the fact that we're watching a character that we're supposed to have hated so much take the mantle. Also, kind of a questionable choice. If you were to watch The Office and they had done a prequel series, and the character that they'd chosen to follow and give everything to was Jan. Like,
Yeah, no, that would be kind of weird. Collider said Spartacus House of Usher begins with one of the most substantial retcons in TV history.
yeah, you see him cut it, his head falls off.
Stephen D. Knight talked about how the biggest challenge was writing that first scene, and he
He
had to
has
write
to
it
explain a lot. It
over
has a lot of
and
work to do.
over and over again. Yeah, he said that was the hardest part, the
I
first
honestly think
scene.
they just did what Spartacus has done a lot in this show, which is just rip that Band-Aid off. You know, like it doesn't at a certain point, it just doesn't give a fuck. And it's just like, you know what? We know the show that we want to make. And if we have to do this to get there, then that's what we're gonna do. And so they say that Ashur is now in charge of Capua and the house of Batiatus, and now it's his Ludus, which is the training ground for the bodyguards. And so we're back. The green screens are back. The poetic Shakespeare on the street dialogue is back. The fight choreography, the slow motion gore, the evil politicians, the cameos. Again, Lucy Lawless. We see Gannicus's body in the second episode. It's still hanging on a crucifix while they bring it down.
Lionsgate basically just gave Stephen D. Knight carte blanche.
And
Like
then,
he
yeah.
thought many times, kind of like I remember some of this happened in Scrubs, where he was like, "Okay, they're going to obviously have a problem with this," and they were just like, "No, just do it, just show it. It doesn't matter."
Right. As far as the boobs and dicks, there's more than ever, like just so many, too many. But at the same time, it's like what you're tuning in like, that's what you're going to get.
Yeah.
And then they also recast Caesar. I saw that in a backflash where what they did was they edited the scenes that the previous Caesar had been in and they put him over it. It was weird.
Yeah,
So it was like
strange.
instantly, I think other people realized too. They were like, what happened to the guy who was playing
So
Caesar?
you're saying it was like archival footage?
Right. I think the actual person, because I think they kept Marcus, but Crassus. But I think that what they're going to do is Caesar's going to play a role later on in the season, and the other guy was all like busy with an Australian like NCIS or something. I think that's what I read.
Reminds me a lot of like Incredibles 2, where even though that was animated, I remember they went back to show a previous scene and they made the character different.
Yeah, by doing that though, they gave away that he was going to be in it.
Right.
Like, that they were definitely going to include Caesar, because why else would they not just use the old clips? Like with Gannicus, it was sad. They showed him, so you knew that he's not coming back. There were a few people, like I said, at the end of Spartacus who were alive, who Spartacus speaks to try to like continue his movement.
I remember,
and I wonder if anybody's from there is going to return at some point. But right now, we're at the house of Ashur, and he's got this like misfit group of gladiators. They really, really, really aren't up to par with what we saw in the first couple seasons at House Batiatus. Like his group was. There was no talking in the sand pits while they were like training. In this group, they're all kind of just joking around. And in fact, Ashur shows up and he's like, "You guys are worse than I was, and I was the worst of my crew."
Okay,
and
so
then
yeah,
and
it was
he kills one of them.
Oh, he kills one
Yeah,
of them?
he ends up killing one of his guys because the guy's like, "We heard that you just stabbed Spartacus in the back." And he's like, "Oh, yeah?" And then he ends up killing him, which plays a role later on when he is given he's able to weasel himself into one of the competitions, which might get him into the arena, his people into the arena. And so he says, "Who's our best fighter?" to the Dottore. And the Dottore says, "Well, it's the guy that you just murdered." So So then they have to run competitions for the first episode, and there's clearly one dude who is like standing out, who they keep on giving the same Spartacus shots. Like he looks at Dottore's dagger, like he at some point is going to kill Ashur, like he has a grander plan. And so they try to make him into this really cool personality. He's the golden boy. And what happens to the golden boy in Gen V?
In Gen V? Oh, he dies by
He
the end
dies
of
in
the
the
first
first
episode.
and that's exactly what they do here. They go to the competition. They're in this tiny little arena. It's the same one we saw in the original Spartacus.
Right, they shot in New Zealand just like the original too.
Right, and it's the green screens and all that, and the fighting goes down. What happens is that Ashur, he ends up pitted against his like arch nemesis, who just doesn't respect him as someone of worth, because even though he is under the purview of Marcus Crassus, like the guy who defeated Spartacus, so he's in his favor, so nobody can really mess with Ashur. He's still just not respected. So he brings this Logos guy to fight for him, and the other opponent just brings out 3 little people who are all brothers. I think they're called like the Pharaoh brother or the Ferox brothers, right? And they walk out there, and everybody's making jokes and laughing
Is
and
this like
stuff
the
like that.
David and Goliath situation or
But there's
something?
3 of them.
Right.
And so they start fighting, and they get a few swipes in there. They hurt the guy. They hurt Logas pretty bad. But then he's like, okay, I'm going to take this seriously. He is able to dispatch all 3, like kick them around and stuff. He gets up there and he starts obering it off, from Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
He starts monologuing. He does what everybody knows is going to get him to die. And
To
so
gain that knife in the back.
that's exactly what happens. One of the little guys jumps up and literally slams him in the back, and then all the other ones jump on him, and then he's dead.
It seems like that would be kind of predictable and
It
not
was.
fun to watch in that way.
I mean, what was fun to watch was, again, the fight scenes and the bloodshed. Like, he gets sliced in the back in a way that would kill most men right then and there, and that was just like something he walked off. It wasn't until he got the knife to the throat that he was dead. So what does Ashur do? Ashur feels like he needs to vindicate himself. He asks for a rematch. He's not going to get one immediately because, again, they're laughing at him. And so he realizes he needs a new fighter, but he also needs a gimmick. Otherwise, he's never going to get into the big arena. And that's where the most accolade comes from, is if your fighter actually wins it all.
Yeah.
We saw that a lot in how Gratuitous, the previous owner of the slaves, would treat everybody. Like Gannicus or Spartacus, he really, really liked his prize picks. So Ashur goes out there and tries to find another slave to buy who he can train. And he runs into who? He runs into this girl.
Yeah, so a gladiatrix, right? And my question is, I read, or at least the actress said, that this was the first time that gladiatrix, I have such a hard time saying it, but was shown in...
Gladiatrix?
Yeah, gladiatrix was shown in the Spartacus world. And I was wondering, did you not see any of them in the first series?
In the first series, what they did was that there were sex slaves or part of the House of Gratuitous who the gladiators would sleep with, or the heads of the house would sleep with. And one of them, I think, becomes a serious gladiator type fighter because she goes to prison and she gets really, really tough. And then she's the one who actually kills Ashur. And I think that she survived. She was Crixus's wife, if I remember correctly. But yeah, we do see women fighting. We just don't see them ever as part of the gladiator brotherhood.
Right.
And that's a big deal. Because if you think about, if you take it look at sports today, there's not a lot of sports where we mix genders because just the way that people are built biologically, it's kind of difficult for a woman to have to compete, and especially on a gladiator field. There were women gladiators, but they would fight themselves for the most part.
Right. And the character that you're talking about is Achillea, right?
He changes her name. So at first it starts with an N, but then he's like, that's no good. We're going to switch it over. And she tries to kill him. But then he's like, hey, if you win your freedom, you're good to go. And if you kill me, then everybody's going to want to hunt you down. So you should try to win your freedom. So in episode 2, that's what she's doing, is she's trying to show that she can be as good a fighter as any of the guys, if not the best, because that's really what they need from her. Is they need the gimmick in order to, and they need a good fighter at the same time. The problem is she hasn't really proven that to anyone. And so they're constantly doing sexist barbs and stuff like that. And even the Dottore just thinks she's a joke. And so she's just stuck,
Right. And I'm waiting for one scene in particular. Is it one that happens with her? It was one that's...
Probably at the end.
Yeah.
Are you just talking about, so she's busy training, and at the same time there's an orgy going on inside underneath the layer of the household. They're drinking and partying, and these 2 guys come up there who've been mean to her, and they start to try to rape her, which is kind of similar to the other series that we're going to be reviewing pretty soon.
The Abandoned.
Where there's a girl who someone tries to rape.
Right.
And then how does that end up in the Abandons?
Well, he ends up dying.
Yeah, he ends up dying. And in this,
I would
the same thing, but she is in the process where she's being held down, and she manages to break out of that and grab the guy's dick and balls and just rip them right off.
Yeah, and you see it, right?
Well, it's funny. You get desensitized to Spartacus sex, and at a certain point, you're just these are all fake. Even the organs that they're showing, it's they got to be set pieces.
But reading about it, and what
he dies
does,
immediately.
Yeah, it just seems like it would be so gross.
It's just along with the same territory that we're used to seeing. The guy dies, and then at that point, everybody wants her to die. The Brotherhood runs out there and is like, "You killed blah blah blah. You're going to die now." And so the Dottore, who's the old guy, but also the main fighter who had won his freedom a long time ago, He challenges her. They fight a little bit. It seems like he strips her of her sword and he's about to kill her. And then he realized that in the fight, she actually drew blood from his cheek. Like it was like the tiniest nick. And from that alone, he says, "You are worthy to be here." No, none of the other guys could have done that.
Did he look at the dirt and see that there was a droplet of blood, or did he just
basically
that was it?
It was something like he was about to slice her head off or something, and then like the drip just happened and hit the dirt. There's a lot of scenes like that where you just see blood hitting dirt. And so he defends her. The Brotherhood has to go inside. She's now technically one of them. And Ashur, throughout this whole episode, is trying to leverage his way back into the arena, get his fighters back in there, saying, "I've got this new fighter. Her name was Neferet. Now it's Aquila. She's the goddess of death. She's going to be great." And he gets invited to a dinner party with Gabinius, who is a friend of Crassus. And they have a little chat because Gabinius' wife absolutely hates Ashur.
Can
But their
she see
daughter,
right through him or something?
well, the funny thing is he's not being a weasel in this series. He is actually the character you're supposed to be rooting for. A little bit, his house.
Anti-hero or protagonist?
A little bit protagonist because there's really no one else to root for. So people are against him and he's having to show himself. And if you want the gladiators in his ludus to succeed, then you have to root for him. He is told straight to his face, "You're not respected." And like, even if when you were a gladiator, you were a little bit more respected than you are now, but you're never going to get these people to align with you unless you like absolutely like made everything, like if you manipulated the entire system. And so maybe that's a way of inviting him to change a little bit to being more of what we've seen before in the past. I don't know. But that scene between him and Gabinius was actually the best part. It felt like one of those kind of like Succession moments where, or Breaking Bad moments where you have the two kind of characters who really lean into that Latin that they do, and it's just a fun, understanding watch.
Kind of like the Daredevil Born Again when you had
right, but
Charlie
it wasn't
Cox.
like two bad guys. It was
well,
just,
no, when you had Charlie Cox and you had Wilson Fisk, and they were
but
talking.
that's like a bad guy and a good guy. This was like two sort of frenemies who were kind of just chatting about stuff, but it really showed how like they were still able to write really good dialogue.
or something like Westworld, I guess, right?
Yeah, in the earliest seasons.
Yeah.
So he leaves that, and he's got all these different things running through his head, but then we just don't see him again. I guess we could talk about the fact that Aquila has, there's someone who's trying or thinking about killing her, and that would be one of the people that Ashur sleeps with, like one of his two main girls. And I'm sure I'm missing other storylines. All the gladiators, they need to have something that like you can remember them by.
Right.
And so like the guy who gets his dick torn off, he was like an asshole. He was always trying to cause fights.
But it wasn't just that, right? Doesn't she stick his dick up his ass? That's what I read.
She may have. Like that happened so quickly.
Okay.
But they concentrate on the tear and like showing his genitals after that. And she got all of it, you know? And so, and it also, like, I don't think you see as much dick in the first Spartacus. You may have. Like, again, I don't remember, but I feel like they did it so that later on they could tear one off. Like, they were like...
Just so many of them, so we have the right to.
Right. So there's other stuff always going on. Caesar doesn't like Ashur that much, so he's the one who caused the entire gladiator camp to spend a day clearing off all the dead bodies of the previous Spartan, or the Spartacus like loyalists. And that was about the joint of the first two episodes.
Yeah, and okay, so like if you had to say what the dialogue is mostly like,
I said like it's a mix of Latin, Shakespeare, like, but Shakespeare on the street.
Yeah, so what D Knight said was that it was a mashup of kind of like contemporary Shakespeare because of more profanity, and Robert E. Howard. Robert E. Howard was the one who created Conan the Barbarian.
It's genius, honestly. Like that part of it, it's crazy how you get like, again, the bad sex, the crazy bad CGI, the really cool fight choreography, the cheesy explosions. Like there would be, I think, times where the stands would all collapse in the arena. And if I remember correctly, in season 3 and season 4, it looked so like it just looked like it could have been shot through a fog of glass, like stained glass or something. I'm sure they could do better now with AI.
So were the first two episodes as good or better than the Spartacus first two episodes? Because the first two episodes in the original series are the only episodes that have 7s on IMDb. Every other episode,
I would have to
like
go back to the
9s.
first season. If you're just asking, though, is this series on par with the previous ones?
Right.
I can tell you this. It's got all the stuff. And that includes Ashur, because Ashur, he's played by Nick E. Terbe, right?
Yeah.
And I saw him. I didn't like his character in Spartacus, and then after that, he showed up in Expanse, and he was actually a good character there. So he sort of redeemed himself. He showed that he had range, and so now seeing him back in Spartacus playing a more tolerable version of himself, that's cool.
He loves the character. He said even if he was doing another show when Stephen D. Knight called him, he would have like quit that show or movie and just done this.
But I hated, like, you were supposed to hate him because he was in the Gannicus storyline. He betrayed his like best friend or something. Then later on, we see him just lining up with all the evil dudes. Like he was the one who was like, "Yeah, put us back into slavery. Like get us and just give me props for that."
Is he like Ramsay from Game of Thrones?
No, no, you're giving him way too much credit. Like Ramsey was cool. Ramsey was a badass. He could kill, like he was terrible. He did terrible things to Sansa and stuff, but he was like the best villain because he was perfect in like a killing machine. We saw him at numerous times just like hunt down Theon like it was nobody.
So you're talking more.
Manipulate.
You're talking
This
more
guy.
about like Theon's uncle, that type of character where you weren't supposed to
Not
like him
even.
at all.
Theon's uncle's closer, but he had at least like some moral code that he lived by. Like he thought he was doing the right thing.
Right.
And I don't know how to explain that, but like no, this guy was way worse. Ashur was the worst of the worst, and they gave him the show, but that's not the reason I didn't like it. Because in the end, I didn't like the show personally. There's no point in watching all the gratuity that I've been talking about if you're not rooting for the characters. That was the greatest thing about the Gannicus, Spartacus, and I'll include both versions of Spartacus. I don't care. Oenomaus, who was the Dottore, Batiatus, Lucy Lawless, I forget, Lucretia. Really, most characters, even including like later seasons Caesar and stuff like that, Crixus, all of them were great. Like it may take a while to like understand them, but they were all really good. And in this show, it feels like we're playing catch up to that. Like we're trying to get there, but because the gladiators don't even really act like gladiators quite yet, it's really hard to be okay with any of their personalities. The only one I'm good with is Chorus, and Chorus is Dottore. He's a good character, but like I watched 2 episodes and I just feel like I don't feel like watching anymore.
Well, it also seems like you haven't mentioned, like, talked about Kososhia. She's a
Akilla,
character.
the main character, right?
Well, no, that's Tanika Davis.
Oh,
I
okay.
find it funny because she was a briefcase model in Deal or No Deal, and then she ended up getting that show. But I'm talking about like Claudia Black. That's the name of the actual actress, Kososhia.
Yeah, I think that I did mention her because she's the wife of Gladius or whatever his name is.
Okay.
Gladius. They all have the crazy names.
What
but
about
she constantly is just giving the evil eye to Ashur, and so they have a thing going where like they may end up together. Who knows?
what about Messia though? Messia, again, that's a
Okay, so Messia is, I believe, one of the 2 people on his arm. It could be like he always has 2 women on his arm. One of them is trying to kill Aquila, and the other one is doing her own thing. And then one of them is another main female character is having sex with one of the main gladiators. They're not memorable quite yet. Like
so it just seems like kind of what you're saying is that Ashur was at least kind of a better character in this show than he was in the other one, but all the characters aside from that really, even though they're trying to give them quirks, it doesn't
all
work.
hinges on Aquila, because if Aquila was just this amazing warrior lady that we could root for throughout, she was the Spartacus who, the problem I think was the fact that they killed off the first guy and then they brought her in to replace the best.
Right.
And it's like, you just went to a random slave hold. You found one girl who punched a Roman in the face, and you assume that she was better than all of the gladiators you currently have, based on what?
Also,
It's just,
yeah,
like, your women fancy. This would have been a better show had Ashur, because he was sort of he wasn't a gimp himself, but he definitely was like, again, the weakest of them all. If he had been kind of stuck with a bunch of really big misfits. And I'm not talking about the crew that they have there, which is just bad gladiators, people who can't really fight as well as the old guard, but like people who, if he had had the Ferox brothers in his thing, the 3 little people, if he had amputees, if he had people who were too young and too old and out of shape, and then maybe a woman, like, and then it turned out throughout 1 or 2 episodes, like the best of the gladiators ends up being her, and then she ends up going against the other people, like legitimate gladiators who are in the arena all the time, and she beats them too, and she's just becoming the sensation. And Ashur's like, wow, yeah, this is my team, you know? And so like because he's so crafty in his dumbness in his weaselly way that he makes a team gladiators of people who are misfits.
So you're saying that like
that would have made a fun show.
they shouldn't have fast tracked it. They should have kind of like
Yeah,
taken
for
time.
some reason, his character just 100% jumped into the idea that she would be able to beat up all his gladiators, and we just haven't seen that. And even in the choreography with her, like, I'm not buying the fact that a 350 pound, like, huge colossus of a dude who we saw in the first few seasons in the pits, like that guy wouldn't just stomp on her. Like,
Yeah,
there's
no,
a difference.
I know that always does kind of seem to be a thing in these TV shows. I know that like all the actors had to really go through boot camp, so you're not gonna
Yeah,
watch.
with Gannicus and Spartacus, you could believe with the grueling regiment that they had to go through that they would be beating up people even in the pits by the end. She's in incredible shape, but even right now she's complaining about having to hold a shield. Like, can you imagine if Spartacus? I guess that they're trying to push the idea that she's going to be quicker than all of them. But if you look at like races, you look at Usain Bolt, and then you look at the fastest female runner, they're not on comparable times. So I don't know.
So what would you give the series overall then?
5 out of 10. I
5
mean, it
out
was
of
still
10?
nice seeing all the nostalgic moments and kind of being like, oh, this show, it's come back to its roots. It's ridiculous, as always. But yeah, 5 out of 10.
Okay, well, it has a 5.9 on IMDb, but only 678 reviews. And just to compare that with the other show had 291,000. So I don't think you can really take anything from that. But the critics have actually really liked it. I think they've liked it even more than Spartacus. It has 100% on Rotten Tomatoes. Variety said, like its predecessors, Spartacus, House of Usher is absolutely
Ashur.
bursting. Ashur, yeah, see, with sex and violence. Overall, the show is a dynamic follow-up to the previous chapter. The Wrap called it a welcome addition. Hollywood Reporter was also very keen on the characters.
Did they see more episodes than we did? We just saw 2 episodes.
I think that I'm not sure.
Because, like I said, first few episodes of the other series may not show what it is. So if I find out at the end of this, if I read some article that's like Spartacus, House of Ashur turned into like one of the best shows, then I'll come back and tune in and realize that I've judged it too harshly. But for right now, I just don't feel the gravitation towards any of the characters and seeing them succeed yet. Thanks for listening. We'll see you on the next episode. Hope you enjoyed this one. Bye.
Bye.